we have an additional example on Newton's laws. A traffic light weighing 100 newtons hangs from a vertical cable tied to other two cables that are fastened to a support. So the upper cables makes an angle 37 degrees and 50 degrees with the horizontal. Find the tension in each of the three cables. So basically, na-label as T1, T2, and T3 ang tuluka cables. So ang tendency is that first things first is you need to draw a free body diagram for each of the object nga naa sa or each masses nga naa sa figure. So ang tendency for this case, we'll draw two free body diagram. One is kaning traffic light hanging, and the other one is kaning tulo ka cables centered at this point here. So again, draw tag free body diagram in such a way nga ang origin kay nasa center sa cable. So ang forces present for this case are two. One is your tension 3, which is simply going through this direction upward. Okay, T3. And the other one is your weight, the weight of your cable, which is simply downward. Okay, so here, if we're going to transfer that one, the FBD for the traffic light, okay, is simply kini. I'll have to put some labels. This will be your positive X here. This will be my positive x-axis here, and then here you'll have positive y-axis. Okay, so tension T3 moves towards positive y-axis. Okay, so you'll have here, label it that one as red. And then ang weight is simply downward. Okay, so here, this is your T3, and then your weight. Okay, next is simply ang free body diagram centered here at the center of the three cables. So we're just gonna erase this one. Okay, so ang next is simply we're going to make an origin in such a way that the origin is centered here. Okay, so ang sunod is that we will trace there are three forces present aninia. One is in the form of your T1, T2. So kay kanimo ng origin, no? So ang tendency is that this will be your T2. Okay, the other one is your T1, kini green one, and the last one is your T3. Okay. So take note that in a free body diagram, mag-start yun ang tanang forces at the origin. So if you'll notice, by using some geometry, this angle here is simply also equal to 37 degrees. While the other one here, this is also equal to 53 degrees. So if we are going to transfer this figure in a nicer nga free body diagram, so ang tendency is that you'll have the FBD for the cables. Okay, so you'll have here so nakay T1, which is nasa second quadrant. Okay, this will be your T1. Next is your T2. Okay, nasa first quadrant. And lastly, your T3. Okay, which is simply along the negative y-axis. Okay, so we'll put some labels for this one. You'll have here T1 with some angle 37, right? And then you'll have your T2. This is your T2 with some angle 53 degrees from the horizontal. And lastly, you'll have T3, which is simply downward. Okay, so take note that this is positive x-axis and then this is positive y-axis. So next is simply, if you'll notice from your first free body diagram, all of the forces, these two forces is lying along y-axis. But if you'll notice for your second free body diagram is that ang imong ang T2 ug ang T1 ug ang T2 kay nasa sa first and third quadrants. So, ang tendency is that we need to look for its components first before nato ipang-add ang tanang mga forces. Okay, so if you'll notice also, the figure or the system is in equilibrium. So, na may idea nga you will use Newton's first law. So, here, pero before anything else, we have to look for the components of your T1 and T2. So, again, liko na to ha, pag mag-component method ta, all we have to do is simply, yes, enclose in a triangle, ay mohang angle 31, and then here, this will be your T1x, okay, and upward is your T1y. So, pwede na din siya i-disregard. Okay, so your T1x is on the adjacent side of angle 37, so meaning to say that would be cosine. So you'll have T1 cosine 37. Kunya na nako incorporate ang negative. Kabalo ko nga it's towards negative x-axis. So ang tendency, di sa nato incorporate ang negative kay redundant man siya inig-add nato sa mga vectors. Next, your T1y is on the opposite side of your angle 37. So you'll have T1 sine 37. Okay. Next is your T2. So again, component nimo ni. So this would be your T2x. And the other one is your T2y. Okay, so your T2x is on the adjacent side of your angle 53. So you'll have T2 cosine 53. Then next, you'll have T2y is on the opposite side of angle 53. So sine. So you'll have T2 sine 53. Okay, so I guess we're done with looking for its components. So if you'll notice, again, ang ipangita niya kay tension, find the tension in each of the cables. So ang tendency is that ipangita kay si T1, T2, and then T3. Okay, kani yung mga values at wanggi pangita, variables. So first things first is that I'm going to apply Newton's first law for this first free body diagram. So ang tendency is that summation of forces along y is equal to 0. Okay, wala may forces along x, so di na ko wala na tayo care aning along x. So along y diretso. So i-add ang mga forces nga nasa y-axis and then i-equate to 0. So for this case, kani nga free body diagram, nasa duha ka forces. So inyong timan-an kung padulong siya sa positive y-axis, positive nga force, and then kung the opposite way around, so negative. So your T3 is positive, so yes, T3. And then imuhang weight sa traffic light is negative kay downward or towards negative y-axis. And then equate to 0. So, adding weight both sides. So, mag-add ko og weight both sides. Mag-add ko og weight both sides. So, what tendency is that ma-cancel out ni siya. So, that would only mean that your T3, tension 3, is simply equal to its weight. Okay, and its weight, so, traffic light is equal to 100 newtons. Okay, so pasabot na nakoy value sa ako ang T3. So, I am left with a variables nga unknown, si T1 o si T2. Okay, so kana. So, na tayo final answer nga isa. So, next is that, manamantaan nga free body diagram. So, we'll move on to another free body diagram. So, take note, there are two unknowns na lang. So, pasabot kay, I need two equations for this case. Again, since there are two unknowns nga variables, so I need two equations for this case. So, ang tendency is that here, kani nga FB diya itong atubangon. So, both na may x and y axis, no? So, again, using Newton's first law or the law of inertia, which states that summation of forces along x is equal to 0 kung naka-inequilibrium ang system. So, pasabot ani kay i-add nimo ang tanang forces nga nasa x. So, ang tendency, ang mga forces nga nasa x-axis kay duha lang, si T2x o si T1x. So, ang tendency is that T1x is towards negative x-axis. So, negative, you'll have negative T1x. Okay? So, plus, you'll have here positive ni siya kay towards positive x-axis man. So, you'll have T2x and then equate that one to 0. So, ato naman yung gipangitag components kagaina. So, kani, and then kani. So, bantog wala na mo gipan negative diri kay ang negative nga sign kay nara diri nga gi-incorporate. So, kung nag-negative mo diri, plus nag-negative pa mo diri, so redundant na ang negative sign mag-change iyang signs, basically. So, you'll have here negative, you'll have T1 cosine 37, plus you'll have here T2 cosine 53. And then equate that one to 0. Okay, so nakoy one equation, two unknown. So it's impossible nga ma-solve nimo ng duha ka unknown kung isa lang imuhang equation. So ang tendency is that next, we'll move on next is diri sa y-axis. Pasagdaan sa nato ng equation. So ang tendency is that you'll have here next, i-add daw nako ang mga forces nga nasa y-axis since niubay man siya Newton's first law, equate na ko siya og 0. So, there are three forces, duha ang upward, isa ang downward. So, you'll have T1y plus T2y, and then you'll have minus T3, which is simply equal to 0. So, your T1y, take note, which is on the tara ang mga components diyan niya. So, you'll have here T1 sine 37. And then you'll have plus T2 sine 53. And then minus, your T3 is simply, ang value is 100 newtons, right? So you'll have minus 100 newtons. And then equate to 0. Okay, so you'll have here two equations and two unknowns according to your math in solving systems of equations. So ang tendency, it could either be magamit tag substitution method or elimination method. So for this case here, we're going to use substitution method. Okay, so ang tendency is that you'll have here, kining aside, mag-add ko kining a term both sides. So ang tendency you'll have T1 cos 37 is equal to T2 cos 53. And then divide cosine 37 both sides of the equation. So you'll have here cosine 37. So the tendency is that, okay, ma-cancel out. So your T1 is simply equal to this value here. For expression T2, you'll have cos 53 over cosine 37. And I'll call this as equation 1. Okay, kani, we'll call this one as equation 2. So all we have to do is to substitute equation 1 to equation 2. So again, I repeat, you'll have here substitute equation 1 to equation 2. So one tendency is that the value of your T1 is this. So you'll have here T2 cos 53 over cosine 37 quantity. So you'll have here sine 37 plus you'll have T2 sine 53 is equal to, add 100 both sides, so you'll have 100 newtons. Okay, so next, what we're going to do is simply ipang-solve mo siya. So this is simply cosine 53 times tangent 37, so that would be equal to 0.45 T2 plus you'll have here 0.8 T2, which is simply equal to 100 newtons. So this case, you are left with one unknown, so combine like terms, so that would be equal to 1.25 T2, which is equal to 100 newtons. Divide 125 both sides of the equation, so the value of your T2 is simply equal to 80 newtons. Okay, so nanatay answer for your T2. Next is that we're going to substitute this value to equation 1. Okay, so again, we're going to substitute this value to equation 1. So you'll have here, next is that substitute T2, which is equal to 80 newtons, to equation 1. So you'll have here naakay T1, oops. So you'll have here T1 is equal to, you'll have quantity 80 newtons cosine 53 over cosine 37. So the answer will be equal to 60 newtons. So this will be the final answers for that one. Okay, so therefore, T1 is simply equal to 60 newtons, while your T2 is simply equal to 80 newtons, and T3 is equal to 100 newtons. Okay, so mas dako tension imuhang T2 over sa T1 if we'll try to check, okay, on the figure. Yes, it does make any sense. Di man sila equal og angle o wala pud na center ang imuhang traffic light, so most likely dako og tension imong T2 compared to your T1.